Until hesitancy popped up from Republican lawmakers in the U.S. and hesitancy in Tehran. Let's go to Washington now for the very latest with our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cicchini. So, Reggie, tell us more. Where do things stand today?
Well, Miranda, they stand in a state of confusion, and that's because over the weekend, Donald Trump posted to social media that an agreement with Iranian officials had been, quote, largely negotiated. And it was within a couple of hours after that point that we saw some of that pushback from Republican lawmakers who argued that the United States may be giving in too much to Iran. And then we saw the Iranian officials come back to say that there was still nothing that had been hammered out entirely and that things were still in progress going forward. We also heard from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggesting that Donald Trump was not going to be rushed into a deal. So here we are over the weekend where another 14-point memorandum of understanding was being discussed by both sides. Donald Trump saying that it was close to being done, walking it back to saying it's potentially going to be done. And here we now are on Monday waiting to see what both sides are ultimately going to determine.
Well, there seems to be so many challenges here, Reggie. How would a potential deal work exactly?
Well, from what we understand from this memorandum, it would touch on nearly all topics that have been, at the center of the conflict since this war started, including reopening the Strait of Hormuz, where the Americans say that the blockade will be lifted, but the Iranians say if that happens, then they're going to need to retain some kind of control over the strait, which has faced some criticism for violating international law. We also know that the United States has said that Iran can't charge any tolls, but Iran is saying, well, maybe we're going to charge some kind of passage fee, and it would need to be under our direction. There's also the issue here of Iranian frozen assets that they want to see released, along with reparations for war funds. Americans have potentially discussed the idea of Iranian assets, but there's some pushback from Republicans who argue that that would be too similar to the agreement that Barack Obama had negotiated during his second term that Donald Trump ripped up during his first term. The one thing that we do know is that this memorandum of understanding would simply allow for negotiations to continue in terms of things like nuclear issues in Iran. That would be something that would take some time to negotiate.
Let's talk about that. What about Iran's nuclear program? Because that still seems to be quite a sticking point here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've heard from the Iranian supreme leader last week to suggest that highly enriched uranium in the country would need to remain in Iran, even as the Americans say that it needs to leave the country. This memorandum of understanding ultimately punts the issue of Iran's nuclear program down the road to say that this would open up a 30 or 60-day time frame for the deal to then negotiate a deal on Iran's nuclear program. And again, that is facing some pushback from Republicans inside the United States, arguing that the main objective for this goal, for this war from the beginning, was to stop Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And if the nuclear material remains on the ground, then the question is, what was the point of this war starting in the first place? The Americans, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, suggest that this is the best way to move forward. It is a question, though, as to whether both sides are ultimately going to come to an agreement. It appears right now that this deal simply looks more like an extension of a ceasefire.
All right, so even if there is a deal, Reggie, are we expecting immediate relief in terms of energy prices?
So this is what we've been hearing from analysts, that even if there is a deal struck to open up the Strait of Hormuz and nothing else is dealt with, it's going to take months to get the number of vessels in and out of the strait to where they used to be, on that 130, 140 vessels moving per day. There's also the issue here of what those vessels are going to be carrying. Yes, there are warehouses with oil and crude that have been stockpiled. That would be put onto the vessels first, but it would take a significant amount of time to actually get oil production back to where it was before, because not only have the machines not been working, they would need to rebalance things like water and other materials that are used to extract the oil from the ground. That would take time. We would also see likely some delays in getting prices down overall. In order for Americans to pay $3 a gallon for gas, oil needs to hover around $60 a barrel. And Miranda, most analysts have said the point of $60 a barrel is probably not going to be reached again until the early 2030s.
All right, that is our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cicchini. Thank you for the update, Reggie.
Global conflict update. The evolving fronts in the Middle East and Ukraine. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the strategic update. Today, we are analyzing a period of profound geopolitical volatility We are currently witnessing a simultaneous escalation across two primary theaters, the Levant and Eastern Europe. While these conflicts are geographically distinct, they are increasingly interconnected through military partnerships, drone technology, and the shifting alliance of the global North and South. Over the next few minutes, we will break down the current status of the war in Gaza and Lebanon, the direct tensions between Israel and Iran, and the long-term outlook for the Russia-Ukraine front. Let us begin with the immediate crisis in the Middle East. For over a year, the conflict in Gaza has remained the epicenter of a regional instability. As of today, the Israel Defense Forces have transitioned into what they term Phase 3 of the operation. This involves a shift from high-intensity divisional maneuvers to targeted intelligence-driven raids. While the military wing of the Hamas has been significantly degraded, the humanitarian situation remains a primary concern for the international community. The what's next for Gaza is the most difficult question of all. We are looking at a prolonged period of security vacuum unless a viable day after governance plan is established. Watch for increased diplomatic pressure from the U.S. and Arab partners to transitions toward a multinational oversight committee. Though domestic political hurdles in Israel remain a significant roadblock. However, the focus of the regional conflict has now shifted decisively north. The border between Israel and Lebanon is currently the most active front. What began as a low-level exchange of fire with Hezbollah has evolved into a full-scale ground and air campaign. Israel's objective is clear: to push Hezbollah forces north of the Litani River and restore security for the displaced citizens of northern Israel. Hezbollah, however, remains a much more formidable adversary than Hamas, possessing a vast arsenal of precision-guided missiles. In the coming weeks, expect to see the IDF expand its ground operations in southern Lebanon, while simultaneously targeting Hezbollah's financial and logistical hubs in Beirut. The risk here is a total state collapse in Lebanon. Diplomatically, keep an eye on Resolution 1701. Any ceasefire will likely be built on a revamped version of this UN agreement. But the enforcement mechanism, specifically who will police the border, remains a critical sticking point. This brings us to the shadow war that has finally come into the light. Iran versus Israel. We have moved past the era of proxies. For the first time in history, we have seen direct ballistic missile exchanges between Tehran and Tel Aviv. The current status is tense, wait to see posture. Iran's leadership is balancing a difficult equation. They must project strength to maintain a regional axis of resistance. Yet, they are acutely aware that their conventional air defenses are no match for Israeli and Western technology. What is next for Iran? We are watching for two things. First, the potential shift in their nuclear doctrine. There is a growing chatter in Tehran about pursuing a nuclear deterrent as their conventional proxies like Hezbollah are weakened. Second, look for Iran to deepen its eastern pivot. As Western sanctions tighten, Tehran is tailoring its survival more closely to Moscow and Beijing. This leads us directly to the plains of Ukraine. The war between Russia and Ukraine has reached a grueling war of attrition, but the map is starting to move again. Russia is currently conducting a multi-axis offensive on the Donbass, specifically targeting logistic hubs like Pokrovsk. The Russian strategy is clear. Use a massive advantage in the artillery and manpower to grind down Ukrainian defenses before the winter sets in. However, this comes at an immense cost to their economy and domestic stability. On the Ukrainian side, the strategy has shifted towards asymmetric deep strikes by using domestically produced drones and Western missiles. Ukraine is targeting Russian oil refineries and ammunition depots deep behind front lines. They are trying to make the war too expensive for the Kremlin to continue. What is next for Russia and Ukraine? We are entering a window of diplomacy that may open in early 2025. Both sides are exhausted. The upcoming U.S. election is the single largest variable here. The outcome will dictate whether Ukraine receives a surge in advanced weaponry or push towards a land for peace negotiation. Furthermore, the Russian-Iran-North Korea triple threat is the new reality. We are now seeing reports of North Korean personnel assisting Russian forces, and Iranian drones continue to be a staple of the Russian air campaign. This means that a victory for Russia is seen as a victory for Iran, and vice versa. The theaters are no longer separate. To conclude, the global security landscape is more interconnected than at any point since the Cold War. In the Middle East, we are watching for a potential grand bargain or a great escalation if a ceasefire in Lebanon can be reached. It may provide the breathing room needed to address the Gaza humanitarian crisis. In Europe, the conflict is moving toward a stalemate that will likely be settled at a high-stakes negotiating table rather than a battlefield alone. For leaders and analysts, the takeaway is this: volatility is the new baseline. Supply chains, energy markets, and international alliances will continue to be tested by these three interlocking fronts. We will continue to monitor these developments closely as they are unfold. Thank you for your time and your professional attention. Once again, if you like the information presented in this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And make sure you hit that bell button to make sure that whenever a new video come out, you have access and you see it first. Once again, I'm Ro, and I'm asking you to roll with me. What's up? No, why? Oh yeah, have fun. Nobody asked me to go to no park, so.
Actually, I did this time.
Where?
When Missy was saying...
Missy is Missy. I'm me.
No, let me finish. When Missy was leaving, Jesse was saying... Missy was like, who you